Hey, how's it going? This is College Success, Education 099 from Bossier Parish Community College, open campus offering. Today we're going to look at Module 5. This is Organize, Taking Notes and Organizing Your Information. So probably some of the most important information you need to know is every student asks, how do you take notes in class? Well, you actually start by taking notes before you get to class. I call this pre-lecture note-taking. You're going to use your textbook and outline the chapter before the lecturer or teacher goes over it. As you go through, I want you to make up questions. These questions can be simply, what does this mean? As we're going to talk about in Module 6 and 7, I actually put question marks in the margin of my textbooks, and that means, I don't know what this is. Use different color markers and pens in taking your notes. You're going to want to perhaps take notes in one color out of class and in another color in class. Often I just switch between blue and black, with blue being my pre-lecture notes and black being the notes that I take from the faculty member. You may want to invest in some post-it notes or sticky notes to make flags in your book and in your notes when you have specific questions about things. Now, one of the most important things in a lecture is to be actively engaged with the faculty member, listen and pay attention. Now, this is active listening. This is not like watching television or not listening to a friend or even a speaker at a meeting. This is active listening. Honestly, I will tell you, if you are actively listening, paying attention to everything the faculty member says, at the end of a school day, if you've been to 3 or 4 classes, you should be exhausted. It is that time-consuming and calorie-crunching to pay that close attention. Now, some ways to do that is to be in line of sight of the professor. My recommendation would be you need to sit in the front 3 rows. Students frequently want to inhabit those back rows. You might be a good student, but the tendency to engage in other activities that draw your attention away from the lecture increase the further away you are from the faculty member. And here's just a clue. We know that you're not doing what we need you to do in the back of the classroom, but the classroom can't all be the front of the classroom. So do yourself a favor, sit as close to the lecturer as you possibly can. It's always a good practice before you get to class to review the notes from the class just beforehand. So for example, if you have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class and you're going to class Friday morning, as you get to class, have a seat, say hello to your friends, pull out your notes, and look over your notes from the Wednesday class. That way you won't be cold where the professor starts off. You'll be familiar with what's going on. Often professors begin their lecture by saying, does anybody have any questions? Well, this way you can have reviewed your information from the last class meeting and you will have questions or know that you clearly don't have questions. So I want us to take a few minutes and look at some note-taking systems. The 4 that I recommend are the Cornell System, the informational outline, the informal outline, the block or paragraph method, and major headings. Now, I do want you to be aware you can take notes outside of class and you take notes inside of class. I'm going to show you how to use each of these both in the class and outside of the class. So let's begin with the Cornell System. Now, in the Cornell System, as we look here, the Cornell System has a split down the middle of the page. You have to draw these yourself. You can actually buy Cornell paper, but it's very expensive, so you just get a Sharpie marker or something and draw it down the page. And then we're going to look at the notes that I did before class. This is from a history class, so this is the speed of the Protestant Reformation. This is an example, 2-in-1 sort of. This is the informal outline, so it's not the real Roman numeral outline, but it does include the information here. Because it's history, it's very easy to do it by date, so you can see the important dates and things that took place during that time. I will take these to class, and when the teacher is going to talk about the speed of the spread of the Protestant Reformation, I will take on this side of the page my classroom notes as they correspond to the notes that I took outside of class. So this is the Cornell system. You don't necessarily have to do the informal outline on the opposite side. You could do the block or paragraph method that I'll show you in just a moment, or you could even do a major heading, but that would be a little more difficult. So let's take a look at the block or paragraph method. As you see here, this is a much bigger piece of paper. There's much less space for writing in documentation in class. So I don't necessarily think I would use this in class. I would use this as a separate thing. Often what I do using the block or paragraph method is I take my notes for class on the opposite side of the page from this. So on one side I have the lecture notes from the faculty member, and on the other side I have the notes that I took in class. That I took at home. So you can see here again, because it's history that I'm using as an example, dates are a very important thing. In history, if it's math, it might be the section that you're working on. In psychology or sociology, it might be the theory or theorist that you were discussing. In science, it might be a body system or a particular topic such as that. So you can see it starts with the Union nation of the Kalman Unified. Christian II was the king of Denmark. But then we get down here and it switches from Luther's Reformation to Zwingli's Reformation, and you can see how that goes. So this would be an example of the informal block or paragraph method. Now, a slightly more difficult method of taking notes, although quite fun, is called the major headings. So what we're talking about in this section is the Protestant Reformation, and as we find out through our reading in the textbook, taking notes at home and in class, it takes place in Germany with Luther, in Switzerland with Zwingli, and later on John Calvin, in England with Cranmer, and then Knox will follow. And then throughout the rest of Europe, Switzerland and such, the Anabaptists, they have separate groups called the Brethren, the Millennialists, and the Mennonites. So I would prepare this before class from my note-taking from my textbook, and then I would take it to class, and as the teacher lectures on the material, I would fill in information about Luther, Zwingli, Cranmer, and the Anabaptists as it was offered in class. So each of these are different varieties of information or ways to take notes. Now, there are many things that you can do once you've completed notes, either those that you've taken at home and you've been to the lecture. Then you need to fill in gaps, check for accuracy. In particular, you need to check for the spelling of names, not only in history, but psychology, sociology, science, English. Each of those have very important people's names, and they must be spelled correctly. You can clarify the meaning of what was written. For example, maybe you were getting tired at home when you were doing your note-taking, and your writing has become scribbles. You want to go back and redo that. Maybe use a little whiteout, or just scratch it out and print above that. Here's some tips that I would offer you for note-taking. You're going to want to use a full-size notebook. Now, there are many students that say, oh, I'm going to take my notes in my computer. I don't recommend that on first pass. There you are creating a muscle memory when you write down your notes. Chances are most people are going to have to write out information on a test, so it's good to create that muscle memory. Doesn't mean you can't take those notes and then transcribe them into a computerized format. That's perfectly acceptable, and again, I would recommend that because that creates a third or fourth pass over the information, putting it into your memory. Always leave a little space or gaps in your notes to add information that you may have forgotten or have skipped over. If you're going to use abbreviations, you might want to make a little space on the page, draw a box around it, and say these are common abbreviations. I would avoid abbreviations as much as possible because here's the problem. When you get to the test, you might not remember what you abbreviated it for. I would urge you to compare notes with a classmate, particularly somebody that's sitting nearby. If you are following my advice and sitting in the first 3 rows, chances are there's other good students sitting very close to you. Compare your notes, make sure you got everything very similar. Here's a very important tip. If the professor writes it down in the classroom, you better make sure that it's in your notes. I would also suggest that if the teacher is using PowerPoint slides, chances are those slides are available to you. You can print those out in a note-taking format. That's not to be done in place of any work that you do out of the textbook at home, making pre-lecture notes, but a very good way to take notes from a lecturer is by following along with their PowerPoint slides. Special circumstances in your math classes, be sure you write down precisely what the instructor says. In math, everything is down to precision, and if you are making errors in what the instructor says, well, that only multiplies as you continue on. So be sure you get their information correctly. For science and laboratory classes, be sure you write down all the formulas and be sure you get them correct. Science classes frequently use abbreviations and formulas. You might want to make a table on the page to make sure that you know what M stands for or V or one of those things, so you do not make those mistakes later on. Other things I would recommend: one class, one notebook. Although we're very tempted to buy one of those big 3 or 4 class notebooks, one class, one notebook. It may get heavier later on, but it's much easier to keep your notes separated. Find out where your notes and your book correspond. If you find any discrepancies, say for example, you wrote down something you think the professor said, but the book says something different, get that checked out. Chances are you wrote it down wrong, or maybe the professor was having an off day. They'll be very pleased that you drew that to their attention, and you can make that correction for the whole class. You might want to prepare additional notes that will help you learn. For example, creating charts or mind maps, such as the example we used on the Protestant Reformation. That will help you see how all of these things are linked together. When you find you're having a little trouble, you're going to want to seek help. Find out who the tutors are that you can depend on, or when you can see your professor. Last but not least, in your notes and organizing, check your calendar for upcoming tests. You're going to want to make sure that you have your notes all together and ready to go in time to prepare for that test. That's everything on note-taking and organizing information in Module 5.